I am super sorry about how late I am getting on here tonight. I was talking with some people and doing some research to brainstorm a couple things that I'm trying to work out here on this universe. I mean, calling it a universe feels flimsy because this is way more than that. This is it a multiverse? A megaverse? I think a megaverse is probably what I want to call it. Because, as I was playing around with this idea a little bit, I realized, it's 13 realms, and each realm, when looking at the design of this universe, I got a little caffeine in me today, so I might be a little gibbery, but looking at the universe here, if you start with one of the realms being Earth realm, I hesitate to call it Earth realm because when I designed it to be that one little realm is what we know about our universe. So not just the Milky Way, but Andromeda and everything else is included in that one realm. And so if that one's that size, are the rest of them that size? And if they're all that size, this is a multiverse, but it's not parallel universes. It's full on, the Fae and the wizarding universe and the whole universes. And there are 13 of them. So it is truly massive. So in our reality, if we encounter a UFO with aliens from a distant planet, there are worlds within the Fae realm, just as there are worlds in Earth realm. And so it turns out to be really huge. And while playing with that idea, I knew days ago when playing with this idea that it was also possible to build a science fantasy, sort of like a Star Wars with mysticism and magic and swords and spaceships and aliens. I could do a science fiction style story using the fantasy aspect of this universe to create a futuristic space opera style. And if you have the range from contemporary or urban fantasy to space fantasy to caveman fantasy, I started to think okay, so yeah, cyberpunk fantasy. And then if you're going to do a punk setting, you could have a steampunk setting. And then I really started to sit down and think okay, so if you do caveman, you could do stone punk, which is sort of like a Flintstone, all the way up to Egyptian booby-trapped pyramids, sort of stone punk. And if you're going to do that, it's just a short stopover into a fantasy setting of Greek machines and technology, and playing that up as I guess it's called sandal punk is what they call that. So stone punk and sandal punk do have references for people referring to them. But I started to go okay, so if we were to use a fantasy setting with all its anachronistic capabilities, like I've been playing with my universe, what different time periods and technology levels exist in a sort of a timeline, and then how do each of those apply to each of my realms and my fantasy? And I got oh, this is getting really, really huge. But so I started to play with it. And so I built a list of the different sort of the thing about this universe that I've built is it sort of allows for a lot of the different types of genre fiction. And I've always kind of been a little hesitant about the term genre fiction because it's not very descriptive. But there's something they use that's called speculative fiction that includes both fantasy and science fiction. And so you have things like fairy tales and steampunk and diesel punk and ghost stories and gothic fiction, Lovecraft, occult detective, even things like Godzilla and kaiju, magical girl like Sailor Moon or that kind of stuff, urban fantasy, Weird West, which is like zombies and cowboys kind of stuff, or even UFOs and cowboys, martial arts, spaghetti western fantasy. So like, what was it? The Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, where it's very fantasy elements inside a martial arts film. And then cyberpunk, there's something called Sword and Planet. It's sort of the old, what was it? I remember John Carter of Mars. I love some of that stuff. And the old, Eric John Stark was another one that I loved in that sort of setting vein. And I guess to a certain degree, you can sort of look at Flash Gordon in that way, though Flash Gordon's a little more ray gun and a little less Sword and Planet. So I was looking at those, but I also tried to build that timeline of the different punk styles. And so I was building that. I was looking at stone punk, sandal punk, and then I realized like I've never heard of like knights, swords, and armor style of punk. And so I was like, oh, castle punk, dungeon punk. What do we call that? Armor punk, chivalry punk? I don't know. And then I'm not sure if there's a place for alchemy to fit in there, if there's a gap for it to fit in. I don't want to do too many overlapping ones. Then there's Renaissance punk, Ren punk. That's more like Leonardo da Vinci and his technology. And, similar things that were happening around that time. And then there's clock punk, which is when you start to get geared mechanisms. But clock punk and the next one have a fair amount of overlap, but I don't feel like they're the exact same thing. And I have to figure out which one comes first, because the next one is sail punk, where sailing ships, where you use them to conquer the world, and we use them for shipping goods from one place to another, and pirates and naval warfare. Like that's a very distinct setting, and it's a little bit different from like the mechanisms and clockwork kind of stuff. I feel like clock punk probably comes a little bit after sail punk, but there's that like Renaissance punk, sail punk, and clock punk, I think is sort of the best way I can think to put it together. And then from there we get steampunk, diesel punk. I sort of break up the next two. Some people consider them synonymous. It's ray gun gothic or rocket punk and atomic punk. Because I feel like we had the idea of rockets before we had the idea of nuclear power and atomic bombs. So I feel like they're sort of like, they do have a middle ground of overlap, but they're not quite the same thing in my mind. And then here's the thing that was throwing me off. And I'm contacting a lot of my friends, my geeky friends, and asking them what they think is there's a gap between sort of like the atom age, the nuclear age sort of comes right in after we do the age of the rocket. But the atom age sort of kind of hits its peak around early to mid 60s, and we maintain some of that. We haven't gotten rid of it, but it's not the height of that. I mean, the golden age of the atom was before the 60s. But the next punk genre that we include is punk, and that doesn't really hit until like 78, 79. at the earliest and really focuses mainly on the early 80s. And then it sort of tapers off but still exists. And then like the next one I have here is iPunk, which I consider to be sort of like the iPod and the iPhone and that sort of thing. I thought about doing like a 90s punk, which would I think could probably be constituted as grunge or something of that effect, or early days of the internet punk, so net punk. But to me, that feels like it's trying to shoehorn something in that doesn't need to be there yet. The gap, there's not a huge gap between punk and iPunk. And then after that is cyberpunk and solar punk. And then from there, you can kind of go further into science fiction, far future stuff. But the gap between atom punk and punk, I feel like there is something very important that needs to be acknowledged in there. And that is very much of that like hippie setting. The counterculture, music, drugs, sex, the building infrastructure, self-sustaining communes, growing your own food, eco, save the earth, the peaceniks, all of that stuff. Like they have some of what you need to build a true punk genre. Nothing's been done with it, and I feel like there's got to be a way to play with that a little bit. And so I feel like, is there a thing as like hippie punk? What would that look like? And so that's the thing I've been playing with. That's why I'm a little late getting on here tonight. But so I'm like playing around with like trying to build this timeline of the different sort of punk genres and how they could potentially fit describing some of the elements within the story universe that I've been playing with. Admittedly, some of the stuff I'll end up doing with this timeline of punk will fall outside of my universe here that I'm building, but it has given me an excuse to play with what would that look like in, what would it look like to do I guess I'll call it hippie or peace punk. What would hippie punk look like in the Fey realm? And just like, that's weird. Like, that's a whole nother genre of weird. And so I was playing around with some of that. Clock punk would be fun. Like a clock punk Fey realm, or even like a castle punk. Like a castle punk with fantasy elements. And it'd be such an interesting bunch of things to play with. But going back over some of this stuff, where building the world as I was playing with this past couple weeks, or this week technically, it feels like it's been a month since I was playing with this, but it hasn't been. I did a little bit of juggling around with some of the things between the spirit and the Fey realm on the right-hand side of my circle, which is instead of doing the wedge that is Fey, Earth, Heaven, a Paradise and Hell, Dream, and then Neverland, I actually switched Neverland over to the Forgotten Middle Realm between Fey and Wonder. The one I replaced Neverland with is Wonderland. And I think that makes more sense, because what you have is a sort of let's see if I can show it without the camera freaking out. I'm not sure it's going to work tonight. But so you have the Fey realm here, and that's Earth here. And then up here you have the realm of dreams. And Wonderland strikes me as more like dream and abstract and surrealist. And Neverland is a little bit more fairies and mystical island of wilderness and magic. So it sort of fits down here a little bit better than it feels like Wonderland is just weird insanity. So I feel that makes more sense to have that closer to Dream and a little bit further away from Fae, whereas Neverland is closer to Fae. So I think that works better in that lineup. And then between Fae and the Wizarding World is Avalon. And then between Wizarding World and the Garden realm, I have it's based roughly off of not Istanbul, Shangri-La. So it's like this garden paradise within a valley. Shangri-La is considered like this paradisic, not quite wilderness, but underdeveloped. It's in connection with nature. And Shangri-La is a single place, and I wanted a whole world. So what I sort of came up for with that was doing a little research. It says Bayul is there are supposedly multiple Shangri-La like realms, and that was one of the words for it. I may change that as time goes by. And I have to figure out a similar Crossworlds realm between the realm of the gods and the realm of the spirits. And then Avalon is between wizards and fae, but that's not a realm, that's a gatekeeper fortress. And that's what fits in those. So like, and I realized later something about this design, but if you look here, this is, so this is Fae and this is Wonderland, and there's a secret realm in between them. And so this whole thing forms one solid loop through here. And then you have a similar loop up here crossing around here. And then you have a loop here crossing through here. These three are bridges and not realms. And those bridges are things like Avalon. I thought about doing something like Atlantis, but they don't fit the themes that they're connecting. And that's what I need them to do. So the realm between Spirit and Wonderland, something that sort of fits both of those, and it needs to be a fortress between those two. Something between the gods and the garden realm, it has to be like a fortress or like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon or something like that. And then the fortress between the Wizarding and Fae realm makes perfect sense as Avalon. So they are fortress guarding the passage between worlds. The spots between these three loops are actually hidden, secret, forgotten realms. So they have to be distinctive to their theme. So Neverland, and I may rethink the one between Wizards and Garden, because Bayul, it's still meant to be cities or regions, not whole worlds. So I got to figure some of that out. And the one between gods and spirits is the big one I still have to figure out there. And then the fortresses for between gods and garden, and the fortress between spirit and Wonderland. Those are pretty much all I've got left to figure out for the overall structure of the universe. And then within each of those realms, there's a story about given characters. And I kind of want to get into that tonight, because I think for all the discussion of the structure of the universe and how they interrelate and connect to each other, that's good. But it's not where this started from. This all started from recognizing how certain stories with characters interconnect and weave a larger universe. And so I think as a way of understanding it better, I think that works better. So when I started this, we were looking at it from the Goblin's Daughter story of the magician, the stage magician, who gets mistaken for an actual magic user by a fey creature and brought through a gateway to the realm of the fairy, and ends up being like a private investigator using magic tricks that don't make sense to those who are used to real magic. And so they think this must be a really powerful sorceress who can do these things. And so that was one of the stories. And right there, it delineates modern day Earth as one setting and the realm of the fairies as another setting, and explains some of the magic of the fairy realm, and that there must be human magic users in the Earth realm. And so that establishes the lower trilogy, the Earth magic users and Fae, in a little triangle at the bottom of my scape here. And Avalon between the Wizarding and the Fae realm makes it a full triangle. Now, starting with that premise from that one story idea, I know that that story partly looked like it was something I wanted to connect with my were person story. So somebody who's a were wolf or a were bear or a were panther. I have a story setting of a young man who's adopted and never knew that he was a were creature. And so he didn't participate in the ritual that would symbiotically bind him to his spirit guide. But he's investigating a crime that has happened within that hidden society that lives within our own society. And so we establish again, Earth has Fae connecting to it, and now Wares connecting to it. And that Were creature story setting includes elements that connect it with vampires, and elements that connect it to ghosts and spirits, and elements that connect it to a group of human beings called hunters who protect humanity against monsters. Now, are the Wares monsters? I guess it depends on the group of hunters or the clan of hunters that you're asking. And so that becomes part of the story element. And I had another story that took the idea of hunters protecting humanity against monsters and their definition of who a monster is in a different story with a group of people I was calling skinwalkers. Skinwalkers are very similar to were creatures, but also different in some ways. And so I was worried that they were too close together. But when I really started playing with them, I found a way to take the skinwalkers and add it to the universe of werewolves, vampires, and spirits, and flesh out some of those details further and build further the world that they're involved in. And once I figured that out, it was really starting to snowball at that point that I could figure out, now I've got stories about wares, vampires, spirits and ghosts, fey creatures, and the implication of human magic users. And then taking it further, there's got to be a spirit realm for the spirits. And the nature of the spirit realm and some of that aspect kind of meshed with the story setting that I was building that involved people who could enter the realm of dreams. And that story has an element of a conspiracy. Ooh, geez, nice whistle there. A conspiracy going on within the community of people who had the ability to enter the realm of dreams, where one of them was looking for a secret that would allow them to pass into what I would call the realm of, what did I call it? The realm of endless dream or unwaking dream. where basically it's just a euphemism for the place where you go when you are no longer conscious for all eternity, which is essentially death. And that would be the same realm that you would use for spirits and ghosts. So it looked like there was a good connection from the earth realm to the realm of dreams that acts as a portal to the realm of spirits. Because the main character in the Sandman's chronicles was a young boy who becomes a Sandman, able to enter the realm of dreams. And some of the villains in that series are looking for a passage through the realm of dreams to the realm of the dead. And so that looks like a perfect lineup. So now we've got Fae, Wizarding Realm, Earth Realm, Realm of Dreams, Realm of Spirit. So what I was looking at that point was sort of doing like a Russian nesting doll, where the outer layer is the realm of spirits. And you open that up, and inside of that is the realm of dreams, and inside of that is the realm of earth. Or flip it around the other way, you're on earth, and inside the realm of earth is the realm of dreams, and inside the realm of dreams is the realm of the dead. And I'm like, okay, so being able to flip it back and forth, depending on which side you start on, one is inside the other. And then playing around with that idea of a flippable cosmos, I got to thinking like, okay, so is there another direction? Well, that sense of dreams and spirit, I felt like the opposite direction to that might be a realm of heaven and hell, and then above that is the palace of the gods, Olympus, or whatever you want to call it. And so from that perspective, you have the realm of spirits, then the realm of dream, then the realm of earth, then heaven, then the realm of the gods. And so you have what looks like a linear path, but depending on which side you start on, which one is the top and which one is the bottom. And I'm like, that's totally doable. I said, well, honestly, I think we can connect the realm of the gods to the realm of the spirit through a forgotten path. And so I had this one loop. And then I got to thinking, like, but where do the realm of fairy and the realm of wizards fit into this? They're kind of offshoots off of Earth. And I got to thinking, like, what if Earth is the middle realm on this heaven to spirit or spirit to heaven linear path, or one side of this loop? If that's the case, is there a loop for the realm of fairy? And is there a loop for the realm of wizards? And so I looked at some of those Celtic knotwork patterns. Well, actually, the first one wasn't Celtic. It was just 3 interlocking rings. And I looked at the way they fit together and I went, I think there's a way to do this. And so the 3 of them interlocking, I went, okay, so if I built a ring for the the realm of Fae, the fairy realm, that's the same structure as the realm of Earth, then it would be, the realm of fairy, Earth, or well, I had fairy realm in the middle, and then it was on either side of that, Earth and heaven and hell. And I was like, how else? What does the rest of that loop look like? And so I started to build that loop, and I tried to do something to figure that all out. And I figured that one out. It was the last one that I struggled with a little bit. The wizard, garden, heaven and hell, dream, and earth in a set of 5, just like the other 2 had a set of 5. And they're going to have the commonality of heaven and hell, dream, and earth as your center 3. So I'm like, okay, how do I make that work? And what do those realms look like? And I knew one of them had to be sort of where the magical items or things like that happen for people. Like, where's the warehouse 13 keep its stored items? Or where does Wizard go to school to train? Like, where does Harry Potter go? Where does Warehouse 13 belong? Or the warehouse that stores the Ark of the Covenant. If you had truly magical beings trying to keep magical items out of the hands of humanity on the Earth realm, they would go through that magical gate on platform, what is it, 13 and a quarter or something like that, or 9 3/4 in Harry Potter, where you pass through the wall in a hidden place and you pass into a realm that other people can't access. That was the wizarding world in Harry Potter. So I imagine there's got to be an equivalent in this setting. So I knew there had to be something like that. And then just building the ring around the Earth, or well, Heaven and Hell, Dream, Earth, Wizarding Realm. I really only needed one more on that one to make the 5-pointed system. And then there's the connector that's one of the Forgotten Cross realms. So I needed to figure that out. And that was the harder one that I had to play through. And there are characters in each of these settings. But when I started with the Were, the Skinwalkers, and the Goblin's Daughter story, expanding to include the stories of the ghosts, so the spirit realm, and then the vampires, and then the Sandmen, so the realm of dreams, and then Heaven and Hell and the Gods realm actually seemed to fit with an idea I had that was sort of like a new take on elements of, believe it or not, the Highlander series, where you've got people who become immortals and they're in a competition to accumulate the power from each other. And ultimately, that power can lead them to become the new gods over existing gods. And at that rate, looking at the mythology of Ireland, where you had a series of, like, I forget which one came first, the Furbolgs or the Fomorians. You had the two races at the start, and subsequent to that were like the Toth, the Danann, and the Celts themselves. And so you have this series of invasions, is what they call it. And a matching pattern exists within Greek mythology about the gods. You had sort of chaos at the beginning, and then the Titans, specifically, I believe it was Cronus and Gaia, who fathered the rest of the Titans, or some of the, depending on the version you're looking at, the Titans existed as brothers and sisters to them. And there was a lot of inbreeding, so it's entirely possible that Cronus was both the father and brother to all of the other Titans. But from there, you have the Olympian gods who came along and overthrew the Titans. And so you have the sense of, from chaotic spirits at the beginning to the Titans to the Olympians, and then the question of, well, is there a next generation of invading gods that would overthrow their parents or whatever, their predecessors? And so in that mindset of the realm of the gods, Olympus, or however you want to refer to it, being very similar to Ireland and the subsequent invasions over and over again, I got to thinking, like, in that realm, you could do things like the Cthulhu style gods, and then like the eldritch primordial gods. So, like, you could do just like the embodiment of the wind, the embodiment of the earth, and then they're not conscious or sentient. They're just forces given a presence, power in the universe. And then from there you get like the elder gods, the first creatures born into the cosmos, the amphibians and the fish and the squid and the Cambrian explosion of life, where you have these bizarre sea creatures and early land creatures and plants that are half alive. So like living anemones that are trees on the land and that kind of stuff. That sort of thing would seem like a horrific, bizarre landscape to us. But for the creatures of the time, there's still like a primalness to them, a vicious savagery, and an uncaringness for all the other creatures that came after them. But if some of those creatures accumulated enough power to become immortal gods themselves, you'd get like Cthulhu-like gods, the Eldritch Horrors. And from there, you could have the first animal gods, or like I had, when you move into the realm of dinosaurs, a dinosaur that acquires enough magic and is empowered or mutated by magic or whatever forces animating the fantasy of this universe, you kind of have dragons. So I got to think, okay, dragon gods. And then from there, you have like the first titans, the people that conquered and overthrew the dragons, getting enough power to become titans. And then from there, you have the ones that overthrow the titans. And then from there, you might have characters like Hercules or the demigods of mythology potentially overthrowing their predecessors. And then from there, the question of, is there a next generation of people like Highlander characters who are accumulating power in this competition on the earthly realm and finding enough power to become immortals, and then eventually work their way up to overthrowing or conquering pathways into the realm of the gods to ascend to godhood themselves. And so I wrote some outlines of some story arcs like that. So I came up with concepts of characters in the heaven, like the paradise realms and the hell realms, and the realm of the gods, the eldritch horrors, and how some of them came to be, the story of the ascension of gods and overthrowing of gods. So I kind of came up with some stories that fit that arc, as well as the new gods ascending through those realms. I came up with especially some character arcs on people ascending to godhood. And so it was just like, I've got that one worked out. Like I said, I have some stories that are potentially built for ghosts and spirits. So I've got the spirit realm. I've got something for dream realm. Got plenty of things to do in the earth realm. I've got the fae and the wizarding stories. And so now it leaves stories for the garden realm and the wonderland style realm. And then sort of like the stories of like the Neverland style stories, the Shambhala realm stories, and the stories for the realm, that whatever it is between the gods and the spirit I need to do. And then the bridging, the fortresses between realms, I've already got a story idea for some of those as well. And then there's a secret hidden 13th realm that came about as I was realizing, like, of course there's got to be something like a 13th realm. You can't stop at 12. And where does this all fit? How does this fit in with the larger structure of the universe? Figured that part out. And then I'm sort of just like, I've got these character stories for most of it. I got to figure out something for the garden realm and the wonderland realm. But now that those are a little more anchored, I think it'll be easier to figure out where that fits in and just dig through a lot of my my story ideas. to find things that fit. And then, like, most of them are going to be like not fleshed out enough to be stories yet. But now that I can add them to the universe will flesh out some of that tells me how the rest of the story is going to fit. And then looking at that, I had ideas for the superhero theme that fits on the Earth realm. And that leads me to a story idea I had a while back where I had this idea of fae creatures who get a hold of Earth realm fiction that they're fascinated with. Can you imagine elves and dwarves who are fascinated by our comic books and want to emulate some of that? And so, like, there's an aspect of me that's like, I can just imagine elves and dwarves wanting to be superheroes and finding ways to do that. And there's an equivalent in the DC universe of superheroes. You have, what is it, the future, where like Superboy goes to the future and he meets the heroes of tomorrow, or whatever they call them. It's like the Justice League of the future. And basically you just have a bunch of different aliens that have different abilities that formed a group of heroes to apply the different gifts of these different gifts of different alien races to helping and protecting the universe. You could do the same thing with the idea of fairies and dwarves doing that in this setting, where you can have a future superhero league with elves and fairies and dwarves and trolls working together to be heroic forces, superheroes for a universe. It's a weird concept, and I had this idea a while back, and so there are ways to tell that story that would be kind of fun. And then thinking about the future, there's that possibility of what I was talking about earlier, where you have science fiction space travel type stories that involve werewolves and vampires and elves and dwarves. That could be totally fun to do a series like that. And so I really got into this. This has been a lot of fun to figure a lot of this out. And it'll be a lot of fun to write the stories and the series that fit into this universe and tell the stories of how all of these things relate and connect to each other. And so I've been thinking about compiling I think I mentioned it last night, was a series Bible that lets you know what the different realms are and the different views of how they all fit together. So people on Earth or in heaven or in the realm of the gods still imagine it as this linear top-down view of the world. And so telling those stories of, imagining the worldview that says there's gods, heaven, earth, dream, and spirits. And then later, you explain that there is this side realm of fairies, and then you talk about how in that realm, their worldview tells them that the realm of the fairies, the realm of earth, then the realm of heaven and hell, and then the realm of dreams, and then the realm of wonderland is how they view the cosmos. And I'm like, oh, so this is bigger than we thought it was. And then you reveal that, oh, there's this realm of wizards. And they view the realms as wizards, earth, dream, heaven, and garden. And you go, oh, so this is even bigger. So what does this universe look like? And then you just start exploring that further and having little bits of excerpts from stories or a short story for each to explain some of the settings and the rules of each realm and what contact with other realms might be like, and just sort of getting that feel of the universe. I want to build that book, that guide to that universe, and tell the stories of different characters' adventures in each of those realms, and then cross-realm adventures and that kind of thing. And it's a lot of material that would keep me busy for a couple years if I did it at a slow pace. I don't know how fast I can get through it. A few years ago, I actually did build a similar large universe structure for a little bit more of a hard science fiction setting that assembled a bunch of my science fiction stories into one universe. And I feel like I might want to drag some of those out and take a look at that outline, because I do recall that at least one of those stories was a little bit more of a soft science fiction, which is approaching a science fantasy. And that one may make more sense as doing a future story for this setting. So I may end up doing that and just pulling out the science fiction and fantasy universes, cleaning them up and fitting them the way they should fit, and have these two large universes to build the Bibles for. And if I do that, I may end up revisiting these universes for game creation weeks. Maybe not this next one, like the board game creation week that I do. I may make a role-playing game out of one or both of these settings. And I'm just like, I'm really digging how well a lot of this turned out. But yeah, so right now, the thing I'm doing a lot of playing around with is the histories of each of these realms. So I have them written down as each realm in a row. And then I'm going to go down through here and talk about, like, if you were to go to the Garden Realm, what would its early days have been like? Its version of the primal caveman days of the universe, or the Megaverse. I still don't know what to call it. I haven't figured that part out yet. But if you take the Garden universe and you go back to its first days, and now you look at it now, what are the differences between those times? How have they evolved and grown over the centuries and millennia? And the same for the Fae and Wonderland and Earth. We know, because we live there, that we've gone from caveman days to modern technology. What is the difference in the realm of the gods from the beginning to the end? And I kind of went over some of that, where it was a series of conquests from the primal gods to the eldritch horrors to the titans and Olympians and so on and so forth. But what's the equivalent of that path for the realm of spirits? And what's the equivalent for the realm of dreams? What's heaven and hell looked like over the years? The Fey realm, the Wonderland, and the magician's realm, the magic user's realm, and then Earth. And so if you laid them all out there and did a sort of a timeline of what that setting would look like over different time periods, and maybe even figure out what kind of story you need to tell to cover each of those realms, like caveman times in the age of in the realm of gods, is a different character story than the young urban professional who's caught in a Highlander conflict and assembling enough power to end up ascending to godhood themselves. Entirely different stories. And so, like, it's really turning out to be this massive universe to play in. And I'm excited about it, because not only is it a universe where I have hundreds of stories I can write, some of them individual books, some of them entire book series, 7 to 12 book character arc. So I've got hundreds of things I can write. But I kind of want to invite a bunch of other writers and say, like, here's the series Bible, the one that tells you everything about this multi megaverse. And using that, I want to see what kind of stories you create in there. And even if they take that and they do something that I feel like isn't possible in my universe, that's okay. It doesn't have to be canon. I just kind of want to see, like, if I built this universe like this, what could other people create in this universe too? And so I want to make it a massive, mega, open multiverse. And I'm having a moment of deja vu right now. Anyway, so once upon a time, I had a couple favorite story universes that I would read in, and one of them was called a series called Thieves' World. The first book was, I believe, called Thieves' World, or Tales from the Vulgar Unicorn. And it was a very dark, very gritty fantasy setting, like high fantasy, like swords and sorcery kind of thing. And it was a shared multiverse. It was a shared anthology series. So every volume, I think there were 13 out of the original books, were collections of short stories about individual characters that lived in this city that used to be a major trading port between realms. But there was a bypass that was constructed, and now the city's dying, and it's just this refuge of these evil, twisted human beings. Thieves, murderers, assassins, dark sorcerers and necromancers, rapists, pedophiles, and monsters. And the whole city's just full of that kind of criminal and corrupt and fantasy setting. And it was very fascinating to see that. Each story was written by, I believe, if I remember correctly, by different authors. And so you have 13 volumes with like somewhere between 7 and 12, sometimes more stories in a volume, written by multiple different people talking about characters in this realm. And some over those 13 volumes, events that change the course of the history of that realm happen. And I love that. I love that multiverse. And a similar thing that I was super fond of for the superhero genre was a series that was edited by George R.R. Martin. It was called Wild Cards. And it had a series of books that were all short stories written by different authors about superheroes after an event that happens post World War II to modern times. And it's the story of people with special abilities in a world changed by the event that caused people with special abilities. And I loved that series too. And that comes about because both Thieves' World and Wild Cards were massive genre fiction shared universe stories. And I kind of feel like this has the potential to be that kind of thing. And I'd love to encourage other people to play around in it. So hopefully some of that was coherent enough to understand what I'm talking about. I've actually been pondering whether or not I'm going to repurpose the video editing videos that I've been playing around with to both show how to make those videos, but also, like, if I were to do a video on how to make a slideshow that you can use to make a video without a camera, what slideshow would I use as an example of how to make it? I could make a slideshow to visually explain some of this universe that I've created. And so there are 5 different types of video that I was thinking of making for that series. So there might be 5 different ways I can start explaining some of this universe. And so I'm rethinking some of that. So I'm going to work on that. And then the second week of August, we're going into another video making series, another week of making videos. So I might double up on doing that, where like this time would be without a camera. The next series might be with just a simple camera or stuff like that. But I could also use it to explain more of my hopefully someday open universe, my fantasy universe. I still got to figure out what to name the universe. I want to call it the 13 Realms. But the problem with that is I'm the only one who knows it has 13 realms. Nobody in this universe knows it has 13 realms. I got to figure out what to call it. Anyway, so that's where we are right now. We're almost at an hour tonight. I could probably ramble for more, but I think I'm going to call it here. And I will revisit this as I do more with it. I mean, we're coming up on a writing week. I might just write a few short stories about this universe. And make some videos about the open universe. I don't imagine I can make a board game about it, but I might be able to. A tabletop game, I might be able to do. Like I said, I might be able to do some role-playing games, but I don't think I can do it this fast. I can't get myself together enough to do that right yet. And product and service might be a little hard to do for the universe. Could I do taste tests? No, not really. Could I do? Well, I could probably come up with some recipes that would be based off of something in the universe. And then music or artwork from the universe. Video games about the universe. Health and fitness about the universe. That would be weird. That would be a weird one. That could be fun. It would be kind of fun to do an entire month where everything I create shares that theme. I'll have to think about that one. But that's sort of where I am right now. I will definitely be revisiting the universe. And I may dredge up my science fiction universe and give it a similar revamping and rebuild. Man. I'm thinking like next year I may just devote a whole year to just write as much as I can. Because like I said, there are easily 100 books of stories in this fantasy universe, and the science fiction has at least 30 to 50 stories. Some of those stories might run more than one book. So I can see myself making stories in these universes for years. Like if I published a story or two every month, I could be doing this for 5-6 years at least. There's a lot to play with in this. I'm kind of in love with it. This has been a really fun couple of weeks. The video games of the Cuddle Pop and the Liquid Metal Rage, I'm in love with those. I'm sort of in love with this universe that I've built. Yeah, this has been pretty good. All right, I'm going to call it here because we're pretty much at an hour. Thanks for joining me, and take care and have a good night. Yeah, sorry if I rambled a lot. Just excited, having fun. End